Carla, your family has been and had encounters with extraterrestrials, I guess is what we'll call it, several times. But since you have been reporting this, you said that the military and people have been harassing you. Is that true?
Well, even before we reported it, Montel, it began the first time we even contacted anyone in UFO research to help us find out what was happening with our family. We met 2 different times late into the evening with the UFO research group in Dallas, and both times we left there in the middle of the night, we were followed by unmarked white cars through 3 towns, because it was three or four towns away from where we lived. This was the beginning of human surveillance. Then we began to have telephone interference only when we would be discussing UFO subjects.
What do you mean by telephone interference?
Talking with someone else about the subject in the middle of a conversation, and from time to time, particular subjects seemed to trigger the interference. We would be in the middle of a conversation, and there'd be a series of loud clicks on the phone, and the phone would go dead. Sometimes people would, voices would come on the phone and drown one person out from hearing the other. We would get harassing phone calls in the middle of the night.
Harassing from who?
Never identified.
What did they say?
Nothing.
So people just call, ring, and then hang up?
Right, right. Which we hadn't had before. I mean, I know you do get some calls, but these were almost regular. Then we began to have helicopter activity over a house we'd lived in for 5 years with no helicopter activity. Once we had begun to report these things within the UFO community, we began to have helicopters that often were military, sometimes were so totally unmarked, black with the black glass. In the middle of the night, so low, the windows would almost break in the house. Sometimes 9 a day, as many as 9 a day, buzzing our house.
Do you live near an airport?
No, well, we had lived in the house for 5 years with no helicopters over the house. Now we began to have them time and time again. I got them on photo and video as much as I could, but we could never find the source of these. And then my daughter-in-law, who was in the ROTC program at the university, was asked to sign up for what duty she wanted after graduation, and she chose meteorology, and she was a physics major, and her ROTC sergeant said, no, you can't do that. You've got to sign up for R&D. Don't you want to work with the UFOs and the alien projects? Don't you want to know what the Air Force really knows that we don't tell anyone else? And this terrified her so much she dropped out of the program because she knew somebody had been listening enough to us under surveillance to know she was part of this ongoing activity. Cool. And the final thing was when my husband was abducted by military personnel in November of '88, drugged, questioned, and threatened about our involvement, what we knew about the aliens and what our family had been involved with them, and when he wouldn't answer, he was knocked out and doesn't know what happened to him after that.
But he recalls being abducted.
Yes, he does. He recalls the center of the abduction experience. There is a mind control procedure that can be used to keep you so dazed and confused you don't know what's going on until it sort of lifts where you can be questioned, and then they knocked him totally back out.
I have a silly question, though. Did he ever report to anybody? Somebody came in my house and grabbed me and took me out and drugged me? He never reported it?
No, he did not report it because he had absolutely no evidence of it except the experience.
Well, we've been talking about UFOs, and before I introduce the next guest, I've got to come back over and ask Carla this question. Now, Carla, I know for you this is a very serious issue, and you have been abducted, you have been taken, but for us who have never seen an abduction, for us who have never ever experienced a UFO, how can you have to understand that I have to be skeptical. It's like telling me that tomorrow the city of Atlantis is going to rise out of the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
No, it isn't.
There are people who believe that.
Being skeptical means having an open mind. It doesn't mean making up your mind before all the data's in. And I hope you are skeptical. If people want to know what's happened to me, I have a book that's talked about it. It's a cheap little paperback that's worth, you know, $5 to find out. We don't have time to talk about it here. But this has happened to tens of thousands of people. I do research with people for the last 5 years. We have cases going back to 1954 where after a UFO landed on a farm in Indiana and had abductions with every member of the family, the next day the military came en masse and sequestered the family for 4 days, wouldn't let them out of the house while they drugged and interrogated them as well. So I'm not the only one who's saying this is something I've made up in the last few years.
Okay.
It goes back at least to the 50s.
All right.
We have cases as recently as October of this year where people have been abducted by the military, drugged, threatened, and interrogated.
Okay.
It does go on.